Good afternoon, everybody. It's Gary Brown. Welcome to the second in TUG series of training webinars. The host for today is Della Kofelt. She'll be moderating and between the presenters. If you don't know Della already, you really should. Della is, she's on the TUG Board of Directors, and so if you go to the TUG website and click on the Board of Directors page, you'll get a nice headshot of her. She is also a network leader and has participated in, I don't know the last, how many TUGs, Della? Probably at least the last 10 TUG meetings.
Yep,
And Della is also, Della is also a webinar champion among TUG attendees. So she comes up with lots of ideas, and she's here to facilitate this meeting today. So Della, go ahead and take it away.
All righty. Well, thank you, Gary. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for part 2 in our 3-part series focused around training. How do I build a training program? How do I, what things do I need to consider? So in part 1, we really kind of took a look at some of the components that you need to think about. Think about how adults learn, those kind of things to put into perspective before you even build a training program. So part 2, we get a little bit deeper. So we're really proud to have a couple of our channel partners. We have Tom from Ernst & Associates, and we have Julie from CDF. And these are people that really have their hands in building training programs. So I am happy to introduce Tom with Ernst & Associates.
Thank you. Thank you, Della. Assume everyone can see my screen. Some feedback before I move along.
We can see it.
Thank you. Okay. So to start this, I'm assuming all of you are here because you have an interest in training, but partly what I want to answer is justifications, both for yourself or other folks within your company, and why you would embark upon this. And as I thought about this, and I'm going to reference somebody who has had a big impact at TUG sessions himself. Many of you have heard Grant Howard talk about PET, process education, and technology, and these training programs really marry the process to the technology through that education. So that was always at mind. It doesn't matter what great software you have or what good processes you have, if it doesn't get to your folks, you've got issues in your company, and that's what this is all about. So that large investment that you have may not have the ROI that you had intended. And when someone is untrained in providing and doing your job, it's not just that they do something that you wouldn't approve of. There's usually some real impact with both your customers, and they have expectations of you. So it's hard to find customers these days, and you want to provide the best service you possibly can. Same thing with vendors if that's where that person is facing. And it gets even more serious when you start thinking about improper training and handling of credit card information. Or most recently, we're all being faced with Data Protection Act fallout with making sure we're properly handling contact name and information. So there's some serious repercussions for not having well-trained people. And the other thing is, it would be great if we could all just find the absolute perfect candidate for every job in our organization. They already know everything. Well, that's just not realistic. That doesn't happen. So it's on us to go the last mile or a good part of the mile, depending on what we're hiring into. And training is how you provide that. And just to quote some other folks here, as people are looking for jobs, one of the important things that they're looking for is opportunities for progression. And how do you get that? Many times that's through a training program. So to help to attract some folks, citing PricewaterhouseCoopers here, but that's part of what you can use to attract people into your organization, knowing that you've got a solid training plan. Now, in general here, I'm focusing on an in-house plan, and I'm focusing on a system that's up and running and how you make some things happen. So why do it in-house versus go ahead and bring somebody in, much like, so I'm a channel partner, it's part of what we do. But here's the reality. We can train on the ERP to get you to a certain point, but at some point it becomes so specific that you're in a better position to create this program for yourself, as with respect to both content and scheduling it. And then as you start to roll out anything new, it's important that you think about how people are reacting to it and maybe make those changes as you roll it out, especially in that first round of changing. So all of that would would lead you to want to take that on yourself. And this then forces you to learn your procedures, to document what you're doing. You really know that you understand a topic when you're forced to train somebody else on that. So this makes sure that you've got your procedures documented in various forms, and then gives you that ability to make the changes whenever you need that to happen. And then as part of doing this, as you bring people into the organization, into different teams, this onboarding is really a team sport, where this is how folks begin to work together, work with each other, and that's just a good thing for building out all that you need to do with retaining and growing your organization. So let's look at the components then as you build out and think about what this all should be. Your training program needs to be role-based, right? It's no sense handing somebody a 300-page document with all the procedures of your company. This needs to be focused on what they're trying to do, relevant in every manner, so that they absorb what you want them to absorb, and not let somebody just skim through and they decide what's important to themselves. And anything that you're doing, you're going to invest time and resources, money into this. There has to be goals, right? What are you trying to do? Are you changing SOP? And this is a good way to introduce that change, bring in new employees. In any event, you should define what your goals are. Here are the expected outcomes. And then you can begin to measure what those outcomes are. How did this program do versus our traditional on-the-fly telephone game onboarding that we had done in the past, or whatever your current mechanisms are. So setting it up and measuring it is certainly something you want to keep in mind. And as you create these sessions, make sure that they are really defined so that everyone, supervisors, employees, all know what a particular training session is all about, and what's covered, and then also what's not covered, so that expectations on both sides are met. When you have these goals, you should be able to say that after performing this training session or working in this training session, you should be able to become better at some topic. All right, and really really created to help them in their jobs. When you roll these out to your students, right, at that point they're in a student role, put clearly assigned dates on them. And I'll get around to that. You'll need that eventually. Go ahead and do that. That's not how you want to roll this out. There should be dates of completed by as part of a methodology that you're using to bring people up to the standard that you're hoping to do. At the same time, you need to break things down. Putting someone in training for full weeks at a time, it may not be appropriate. Go ahead and break things down into what's consumable. 2-hour classes with no ability to stop, that's maybe not what people are looking to do, and how people are looking to learn today. And then it's important that your most valuable people, your subject matter experts, are the ones who build this content. That way it assures that it really is authentic, and it follows what's real at your company, and follows your process, and isn't theoretical. And then finally, make sure you create digital content so that people can take things away with them and support all types of learners. Some will need to go back to this document. Others will need to go ahead and socialize it with other people, and others can learn just by watching and seeing what's going on. But make sure you've got the options open for people to do all of those things. And as you bring your subject matter experts into this, I mean, think about who does it best at your company, right? That's the role model. Well, those are the people who should be building this content. You base it on the best possible behavior you've ever witnessed, and have them document the procedures. And that way, instead of relying on that person for the answer, because they probably do get a vacation every now and again, you've got it documented. Even if it's not something that people just know offhand, it's in your documentation and ready to go. So the part of that is an in-company help desk person. Who do I go to with questions on a particular subject area? That's important to know and have people go back to the source, versus having person A train person B, who trained person C, who trained person D, and by the time person E walks in, what's been trained looks nothing like, or what's been supported post-training looks nothing like the original intent. Try to bring something back to a formal go-to person to support the process as this gets reiterated in real life. And of course, you've got to back to my consumable segment speech, you've got to blend in real-life use of the skills for it to make sense, right? We can only absorb so much, put it to use quickly, and allow that feedback and have that process continue step by step until they get to the position that they need to get into. And as you're building this out, whoever is taking this class needs to this needs to make sense, and you don't need to invest lots of money in today's world in graphics and in audio recordings. You should be able to do that relatively inexpensive. If you're recording, make sure you've got a tool where you can edit down the recording so that there aren't pauses and areas that you'd want to where someone would lose interest. So make everything as fluent as possible, even if you're not able to record something fluently live the first time. Finally, establish something that's consistent. So from one course to another, they're not relearning the format and the approach, right? Use consistent structures in this so that once they've adapted to your training program once, second, third, and fourth course all should be intuitive to them, and they're just worried about the content, not how to navigate. So make sure you're always explaining, right, that here's what's happening in this particular section so that the expectations are met with each little section. And also, when we think about this, we tend to think about you're learning to use computer software, but that may not be the case in all the people that you need to train. It may be on how to pack a box or how to handle certain material in the warehouse that's challenging. So bring in whiteboard content, bring in video to support that as well. So those are all things you'd think about and include when appropriate. And then, like anything else we do in life, measuring the outcome is important. We all perform better when we know somebody is measuring us, when someone cares, when someone is watching us. So make sure that when this is explained to people, they take it seriously. It's part of the onboarding. It's part of what we care about. It's not just something you have to do because someone in HR said you need to do this. So get everyone in line with the company's goals and understanding why we're doing that. And as always, with anything you do, ask for feedback. Out of the box, nothing's going to be perfect. And over time, things evolve, not only content, but styles of people and issues in the company. So be open to feedback and continue to involve that, which then brings you into where your organization should be in everything as a process of continuous improvement, where you look to improve everything you do, including your training sessions. So that's sort of the hows and whys of what you would need to do. Now, here at ENA, and this is not going to be a training session, an advertisement for Cisco's WebEx. We use Cisco's WebEx, but a big reason that we use it is because we picked it many years ago. And as you start building content and building competency, you think twice before you would leave it. Having said that, there's still some really good things that go on here. So, when we build this out, we build this first for our customers and also for our people. But we started building this. We first emulated our sessions after what were our in-house live sessions. We used to have training sessions in each of our offices. We're a big classroom where we bring people in. We had to make the content big enough for people to travel to us, so we did a minimum of 2 hours, many times more. When we first started building the recorded content for our WebEx training sessions, we basically mimicked what we have been doing live. And then as people were saying 2 hours is too long for me to stay on a WebEx, we dropped it to an hour. And today we've really come to the realization that we need to drive this to meet people's needs into smaller recordings that are really focused on very small business issues. That they're not looking to learn something in general. They're looking to learn specifically how to do a particular task. And so we've done that. And it's also important that you connect the dots. When you have these smaller classes, they still need to somewhat make sense and be in a progression. We also use the software to do our internal ramp-ups. When new products come out or new modules come out, we use that internally. One of us learns it, or we probably learn it from Infor to start, and then we ramp up internally. So anytime we train one person, we typically say, let's train it, let's record it so that we can train all, even if it doesn't have all the characteristics of a formal training solution. So think about that. Once you have a tool set in place, you can do a lot of things with it, even if it doesn't join the full publicized training program for your organization. Chances are either that one person would like to see the training again, or you'd find other people who are interested in it. And then we also use the Cisco WebEx tool for all of our meetings, whether they're customer facing or not. We drive our demos with it, but even process reviews and designs, and it's useful for everybody involved in that to go back and make sure we heard it correctly or saw it correctly, depending on what was going on. So we've adopted it in many aspects of our training, sales, life. What we kind of like about it, so a bunch of different things here, and things for you to think about when you're evaluating a tool. So we can quickly schedule live training sessions. Sometimes that is needed, or we can record for future consumption. Either or, but be able to do a spot session was important. And as I mentioned earlier, be able to go out to a whiteboard to noodle some things, or include video from a person to keep it personal, keep it real was important. Making sure you've got chat and questioning software as part of this, and course materials. All those things I talked about earlier were things that were important to us, which is why we're still with WebEx today. Having a test that can be included at the end, important, and of course feedback. And one of the things that we don't make use of anymore, because we don't have the in-house training sessions, but you might set up an area where you could schedule time at a hands-on lab, where someone can get out of their normal seat, go sit in some training room, some area where they can have dedicated time to learn. Maybe there's a limited number of computers at that location, so you can actually schedule the time and the resources to control the seating that is there. And then being able to set up categories so that different people go to different roles. For us, it might be different software, right? It's our SX.e customers versus our fax customers, but also within roles roles within your organization to find the appropriate training that's needed. So here's kind of an example of our site and some of the things I talked about that are here, including unlisted sessions where you could sort of hide some sessions and give people access to them when required. But also abilities to schedule training at any point in time, instant sessions, and you can read as well as I, but somewhat intuitive way of finding things for folks who get on there to make use of the system. One of the things that we continue to reevaluate, and WebEx has kind of changed their user interface. It's got a cooler, newer, modern view. Doesn't quite have all the features, so for our training, we're forced to keep that back to the look and feel you see here, versus, and you can see it in the top right corner, the modern view. So we're evaluating where that goes, and like I said, the biggest reason we're here is because we're here. It may be time to change as other alternatives are available to us. So a couple of things that are less than happy with WebEx. So when we include course material, it's a little odd with how it shows it. And you also see if you really try to describe the course as we do in detail, you can't control how much you see and all that you see. So there's a 52-minute session, and that 1-minute session is not a 1-minute session. That's a document to support that. So it's a little odd. They let us attach the documents, and they know that in this case it's not a recording, it's a PDF, but it clearly wasn't necessarily designed just for that, and things have changed over time with versioning. And then, as I said before, joining unlisted and ability to take tests was important to at least verify that folks are paying attention and have passed the content of one course, especially when further ones are going to build upon that. We also use another tool out here called Screencast, and we use that. We like the editing in that, so that's one for if you're evaluating tools and you're nowhere today. That's one you might want to think about, where you can do a lot and edit the content really nicely and easily and share that. So we kind of use both, but our cooler editing and all we do within Screencast for the reasons I said. So that brings me to the sort of the end of my allotted time, and and questions. I think we're gonna take them now, or are we gonna take them as we get to the end?
Well, let's take some now. If anybody has a question, go ahead and raise your hand, or you can type it into the question bank. I do have a question, Tom. So everybody talks about champion training, and the focus had always been on training your champions and then sending the champions out. Do you do anything different in the case of a champion training versus an end user training?
So in champion training, what we record isn't really the champion training. It's the end user training. So that in the champion training, you're kind of bringing the curtain back a little bit more to let them understand and be able to react to things that are unexpected. So it's a deeper, and it's interactive. And while we do end up recording those, it's not part of the content that we use. It's more for reference from both sides. When it comes down to end user training, you kind of want to have your procedures all in place, and part of validating the procedures is the champions absorbing that, right? That's how and when it happens. You don't want to offer the options to everyone in the company. Everybody figure out your best way of solving this problem, and that's what the champion training is all about. And at that point, the champions should be driving that training down to the end users with the decisions that were made. I'm not saying be ignorant of the people who are learning it, but the champion training is really built to be a little more flexible in exploring the options, whereas end user training, we're trying to bring them on the straight and narrow, the standard way, and if there are some diversions from that, they might happen, but that wouldn't be trained for.
Excellent, thank you. Does anybody else have any questions? Alrighty. So if questions come up as we proceed with the rest of the demonstration or with the rest of the WebEx, go ahead and just add them to the question box or raise your hand. Just let us know and we'll get those answered for you. So thank you, Tom. That was very informative. So next we have Julie, who is the Director of Client Engagement. She's with CDS. And we need to get her slides up.
Sorry, let me do that now, and then one other question came in, Della, if you want to deal with that.
Oh, great. So one of the questions that we have is a question we get a lot. What do you think is the optimal amount of time for champion training per week or for end user training? So either one of those. So champion training per week and then end user training. The optimal amount of time. Tom?
Yeah, so when someone, so I'll take it backwards, end user training. So when someone is brought on brand new for onboarding, you definitely need to accelerate it, right? Because you potentially don't have a lot for them to do until you've done that. So with somebody in that situation, we'd look at a mix of 50-50. But then as you progress to end user training for someone who's learning a new feature, a day a week is probably what you would want to look at. With champion training, now those are the key people in your organization. So it's whatever you can afford to do. So 2 days is probably the max at that point because they're engaged and involved in other things. But again, with new people, you're kind of forced and compelled to try to make use of them quickly and give them some real life. So probably a 50% balance to get them started.
Excellent, thank you. All righty, so I think we're ready for Julie. Julie, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Della. I appreciate the introduction. I am with Central Data Systems. We are located near Detroit, Michigan. We're an Alliance and a Gold Champion partner. And I am the Director of Client Experience. So right now I am working with a lot of customers who are in the process of upgrading. So I thought it would be a perfect opportunity to talk about how we would plan to train for an upgrade. And in this discussion today, I have some considerations. that we should cover content, scheduling, delivery methods, and then an assessment of your trainees. When you were first going live on your system, it became very clear that everyone was focused on training and getting to know their new jobs and the new software. However, when you're doing an upgrade, people tend to not take it as seriously. So that's kind of why I wanted to do this topic today. So what content is important to include when you're considering what to train in an upgrade? Well, first of all, you need to take into consideration, you get those release documents, and they're pretty verbose. They're many pages long, or you see a what's new document that's been posted. How do you know what areas are most important to include in your training? So I would suggest that you highlight the areas that are most important to your business requirements, and that goes back to your management team. They did have a reason why they decided that this is the time to upgrade and on this particular version. So there was something in those release docs or those what's new documents that stated something that was important to them, that piqued the management team's interest. So it's important that you take those areas very seriously when you're putting together your training program. So one of those could be credit card compliance, PCI compliance, or it could be something to do with new taxation laws. It could be something about just improving how you do your cost price updates. But there was some key reason why your management team decided it's the time to upgrade. So you want to make sure that you include those as foremost in your training plan. You also want to look for areas that will improve the user's life in general. You want to get some quick wins here. So that would help you get buy-in from the user community. So if you could show them, look at how easy it is to find your documents now, or look at how easy it is to do a search. Those are the areas you want to focus on for your user training so that you keep them, again, with buy-in to the project. You also want to consider if there's any gaps. Is there something now that you have in your current version that you're going to lose when you upgrade, and how are you going to handle that? I'm going to give you just a couple of examples. We have a fax client base. Some of them are on older versions of fax, and they're going to the newer version of fax where now there is all kinds of new tools for buyer's control center and purchasing. But what went away was all their replenishment reports. So, that's a gap, right? Something they had before that they don't have going forward. It could be in SX.e, an example might be you had the contact and activity manager in GUI, but when you move to Web UI, you have contacts, but you don't have that activity manager. How are you going to manage that gap? Are you going to set up mingle alerts? How are you going to manage it? So those gaps have to be identified, and a plan has to be put together for how you're going to manage it. All right, so when we talk about scheduling training, this is a big topic because very often who's going to be affected by the change, and then how does it impact other users? So the process may start in one group and then flow to other people that it's going to affect. So the change starts here and is an improvement for one area, but as it goes through the process, there's changes in other people's areas that they may not be expecting. You have to remember, too, that everything ends up affecting accounting, so take that into consideration when you're doing your training. When you're scheduling, you have to split into multiple sessions. I mean, everyone knows that. You can't have all of your salespeople in a training session and no one on the phones or at the counter. But you also should consider, there may be some cross-functional areas where you're going to want to schedule groups together. And there's times when you don't want them together, right? Don't have your AR people in a sales order entry session if it doesn't affect them in any way. So you want to take into consideration, phone and workload coverages, vacation schedules, lunches, busy times of the day or busy seasons. And then you also have to consider, what do you do about your branch locations? How do you bring them into these sessions, and consider everybody in the organization as you're planning your training. All right, delivery methods. How are you going to do your training? Well, Tom hit on it pretty clearly that you have different learning styles. You have some people who are very visual learners, so you need to make sure that you're incorporating things. These are the people that like outlines and they copy everything that you write on a whiteboard down in their notes. They use highlighters. They want printed handouts. They like it when you show the process and they just take notes. That's a visual learner. Auditory learners like to listen. They like to sit back and just listen and take it all in, whereas kinesthetic learners learn best by doing. They want to be on the keyboard. So how are you going to incorporate your lesson plan around all those varied learning preferences? So you want to make sure, especially when you have remote users, how do you bring all those people together? Tom mentioned WebEx. There's also GoToMeeting sessions, but it's a real challenge when you're training remotely because you have no idea if the people are understanding what you're saying or if they're even still in the room. Have they gone out to answer email and you don't even know that they're not participating? So it becomes more and more of a challenge to keep them involved. You can pass keyboard control, you can make other people the presenter, but you have to keep them engaged in the process. And there are times when you have to be prepared to manage difficult topics. There could be a new process in the new version of software you're going to where someone feels threatened that their job may be eliminated by this new, efficiency that you're gaining with an upgrade. You'll have people block you, or try to push back or start, conversations that are negative if they're having problems assimilating into the new system because they're concerned about being replaced. So, sometimes you have to manage those difficult topics. There also needs to be some sort of an assessment of the trainees. So when you were ready to go live on your software, you had business consultants probably on site doing some sort of a readiness assessment, testing your end users, making sure everybody could do their job, show me that you know how to do that kind of thing. So how are you going to do that with an upgrade? People take upgrades very less serious. So, your phone upgrades all the time and you just go in and it's just a new version and you don't care and you might learn new features and you don't care. But with your software, you really do have to know the new features, especially if any processes have changed. So how are you going to measure whether or not your users actually went through the training and if they absorbed what they needed to do? Can they actually do their job? So it's going to be up to you as part of your training to actually put together some sort of an evaluation or a test of your end users. Some companies we work for put together rigorous testing scripts that they have people follow. Others, just kind of are more casual with it, but you do need to make sure that you're ready to go live. And don't assume that because something worked in the previous version, it works in the new version. You really do need to test all your mods, print all your forms, and go through your day-to-day processes and make sure that everything looks good, works well. Can you email? Can you fax? Do you have any third-party products that you had in your old system that now you need to test with your new system? These are all part of what you need to consider when you're doing an upgrade. So to summarize, before your training begins, you want to make sure that you create an active, engaging learning environment, whether it's on-site or remotely. You're going to want to develop some supporting materials, and you're going to want to give your trainees time to pilot the software after they're trained to ensure success. Yet you have to be fair to them and give them the time during the workday to go through and actually play in the new system and pilot their jobs. All right, so with that, do I have any questions?
Any questions from the audience? If you need to, raise your hand or you can type them in the question bank. I do have a question for you, Julie. When it comes to the quick topics do you guys are you recommending like a brown bag lunch? You know, everybody brings their lunch in and you sit in the room and you go through it while they're eating lunch? Or do you say, no, take time out from the day to do it?
Yeah, and we have had clients that have done both ways. They do a lunch and learn session. They'll bring lunch in sometimes, you know, to facilitate participation. But yeah, it's a nice way to do it together for those quick topics, as you say. You know, so I have had people do it both ways. I have even seen where one customer of ours brought people in after hours and bought dinner. So, you know, so that they weren't disrupted by, you know, or distracted by their day-to-day workloads. So I've seen all kinds of ways to do it. You just need to make sure that it gets done.
Okay. We do have a question. With the monthly updates, how do you recommend companies stay on top of the monthly changes?
Right, and that's a real challenge for all of us right now. Things are coming so fast and furious. The good news is a lot of fixes are coming up every month as well, as you know. But the new features are coming fast. So you do have to keep up with the what's new documents. If you do nothing else, look at those that are posted, and I would pay attention to those first and foremost. Then, of course, there's also the monthly release documents and the fixed issues documents that you can look at. But I think the what's new is probably your best bet right now to keep abreast of all the new features.
Okay, thank you. We have another question from Brad. How do you find is the best way to get management to buy into the need for training, given the whole lean nature of the workforce these days with fewer people doing more jobs?
And that's an absolutely great question. It is important that, you know, we as channel partners need to help that process. We need to make sure that as we're providing information about upgrades, that we do instill in the management team the importance of training. I've had visits with customers sometimes where they have told me, well, we upgraded in 2014, but I'm not even sure why we upgraded or what we got for our upgrade. And I think a lot of that has to do with a lack of focus on training. No one took the effort to put together a training program or, gave a benefit analysis to the management team about how important it is for the users to be trained well and how it'll impact their business if they're not. So they need to have, pros and cons, make a good case. It can come from your channel partner and come from your project manager who's championing this upgrade, but it is important to make that a focus.
Is it ever too late?
To do training? No,
yeah.
You can always add more training after the fact. It's just painful if you don't do it up front and you're not prepared for that first day. You feel funny when you go to do your job and you forgot where the button is you need to press to do your job. So, it's not that simple, but you certainly can have ongoing training after an upgrade because there's probably new features there that you didn't consider at first that you want to start using.
Excellent.
So,
Thank you very much.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, Della, I've got a question for both Tom and Julie, because I'm sure you guys are exposed to a lot of your customers in the field. What percentage of your overall customer base do you feel actually has some kind of a formal training program in place?
Do you want to go first, Tom?
Shoot.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so in my experience, I'd say 25%.
Tom, what about you?
Yeah, so I'll probably agree with that. The numbers change drastically based on the size of the company and the ability to devote the time to create something. The smaller companies, there's a few people doing all the jobs. It's harder. Everything's harder. I mean, not training someone's even harder as well. But they're faced with the reality of a smaller business. So those that are gotten to a certain size with multiple branches, those folks are up to like 50%. The smaller ones, it's a very low percentage because there's only 20 people in one office, sometimes less.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised it's as low as 50% on some of the larger companies. I would have thought that a training program would have been an initiative that would have been started with the acquisition of the ERP.
Well, there's a training program for that. It's the ongoing one that's the issue. And folks, we got new technology. We need to learn it. That's good. Let's set our procedures. That's good. And maybe even that first round of user training. But where it falls off is as things change, and as you either upgrade, as Julie was talking about, or come on, or you add new features, that's where it kind of falls, and there isn't a formal program.
Right, especially with onboarding new employees. They expect, the person doing the job before to train the new person, and things get lost in the translation.
Well, and that brings up a good question of who do you recommend does the training?
Well, some companies have very strong training type roles in their organization, but that's few and far between. Maybe you have one or two people that are really good trainers. Most people can do their jobs, but training someone to do your job is harder to do. So it really does take a skill set that not every company has a lot of strength in. So you can also go to your channel partner and ask for a professional trainer to come in and do that training for you. You can always use videos to help with that training process, but yeah, not everyone has a strong training component in their organization.
Do you find the responsibility falling on the IT department or on the department managers?
I think it typically falls on the IT department, which is not the right place for it to be, in my opinion.
Really? I see a comment on here from Kathy Lundquist, who is another channel partner, but she said most companies have formal training for their own products. In other words, specific training on technical products that they sell. Some for HR related, but very few have training for other areas, including ERP and IT.
Right.
All righty. Well, I want to thank everybody. Oh, I have one more. And Dean Wagner makes a good comment. It depends on the size of the company, too. So a lot, and it depends probably on the type of products being sold as well. That's a good point. So I want to thank everybody. I want to remind everybody, too, that this is the second in the series. So in part 3, we're really going to focus on the tools. So we're going to take a look at one of the companies that actually does the video. Is going to have a sample of the tools that they use. They're going to go through how to use the tools. We're going to talk with another larger company that here's how they developed. They started their training program really from scratch by hiring a new person to come in and run it. So we'll have some very good insight focused on the tools, including Inforce tools. So Gary will send out the announcement when we get the date finalized, and please join us for session number 3. And also take a look when the agenda comes out for the TUG conference in Orlando. Don't be surprised if you see some very specific training breakouts at the conference. So thank you all very much.
And thank you for hosting, Della, and thank you, Tom and Julie, for a great job. And everybody, have a good day.
Take care, Gary.